Okay, so we're going to get started here. Today we're going to talk about the role of educational technology and blended learning in higher education. I'm Smita Krishnamurthy, and today is the 9th of February. So I'd like to welcome both my virtual listeners and my listeners who are here in person to our session today. Before we get started, let's do a quick quality check. First, please turn off your phone and remove any distractions. Let's take a deep breath, let it out, and focus on our time together. If you haven't done this already, please run the audio setup wizard and follow the directions before we start the session. Now, if you see a red record button at the top right-hand corner of the screen, please give me a green check. So I'll wait for both of you to do that. Okay, I see that Shamala can see the record button. What about you, Deepa? Can you see it? If you can, then just go into the right hand. It's the fourth icon. Okay, perfect. Very good. So the next thing we'll do is, if you can hear me well, I would like you to go in and give me a smiley face, and I'll wait for both of you to do this before we move on. So the smile, okay, perfect. Deepa can hear me. What about you, Shamala? It's the first icon on the left, and if you can, okay, perfect, excellent. So now we'll get started here. So the first question that I have for you is, do you think that online classes can give you the same learning outcomes as a face-to-face class? So I'd like you to go into the poll, which is the fourth button on the right at the top, and give me a green check if you think it's yes, or a red check if you think it's no. Okay, perfect. So both of you, it looks like, agree that online classes can give you similar learning outcomes, which is very interesting because we will see a poll, which we'll talk about next, in which they ask the exact same question to faculty at other higher education institutions, and we'll see what they have to say about it. So the purpose of the talk today, by the end of the presentation, you should be able to describe some strategies to help faculty overcome resistance to online learning. You'll be able to explain what blended learning is and how it helps to promote deeper understanding in your students. And finally, you'll be able to come up with some ways to incorporate educational technology and hybrid learning strategies in your classes. So let's get started here. So here is the poll that we were talking about, in which faculty across the country were anonymously asked if they believe that online classes can achieve student learning outcomes which are at least equivalent to those of in-person courses. Now, this study was carried out in 2014 by Gallup and Inside Higher Ed, and the results, as you can see, are quite interesting. So this red bar here are the total number of faculty who strongly agree with the statement. And you can see there's only 9% of all the faculty that strongly agree that online courses can actually give you similar learning outcomes as face-to-face classes. Now, the interesting thing about the study is that they also polled technology administrators, and about 30% of technology administrators strongly agreed with the statement. So it seems like faculty, for whatever reason, are more skeptical about the quality of online courses than the administrators. So let's talk about some reasons for why faculty may be more resistant to this idea of online training. So according to a article that was recently published in the Inside Higher Education magazine, some of the reasons that have been cited for faculty resistance include the fact that there isn't really a lot of incentives that are provided for faculty to adopt new technologies and learn how to work with them. So this is not something that's part of promotion criteria. The other part is that faculty may not always be consulted about participation in these courses, so they may not have a lot of power in this process. And finally, it seems that a lot of faculty think that online courses involve less interaction between students and faculty members, and also that there is less support in an online environment to actually reach those students who may be at risk for failure. So with that, let's go on to our first assessment question. Let's talk about some ways in which we can help faculty overcome this resistance that they may have to adopting new educational technologies. So I would like both of you to go into the text chat box and type in some strategies in which you think you can help other faculty at your institutions to overcome their resistance to learning online. So I can see that Deepa thinks we can do this. So Deepa, how do you think we can help our faculty overcome some of this resistance? So I'll wait for you guys to go into the text chat box and type in some thoughts that you may have. I see that Shamala's typing something in. And Deepa, if you could do the same, that would be wonderful. And I'll give you guys a few minutes to kind of think about that. Just make sure you hit the return or the enter key when you're done so I can see what you've typed in. Okay, perfect. So Shamala thinks that we can try to make this process more convenient for faculty, which is absolutely true. One of the ways in which we can help faculty overcome their resistance is to give them more support. So I believe that in order for online learning to become a viable option that faculty will buy into, they need proper technology support. So this is one less thing for them to worry about as they're trying to convert their courses to online ones. We probably can offer them faculty development options to learn how to use these resources. And potentially another way for making it convenient, as Shamala was saying, is to kind of make faculty aware of the technology that's out there. So most learning management systems can actually identify students who are at high risk for failure, and you can then use that information to actually target students and help them. Now, Deepa thinks that you can show faculty how an interactive session can be achieved versus a video recording, and we can also get student feedback and evaluation. So Deepa, can you press the talk button and tell us a little bit about your thoughts here? So the talk button is at the top left-hand corner. It's directly below where your name shows up.
Yes. So I think that traditionally what we had was just a video session that was a recording, and I don't think that's as effective as having feedback or an interactive session like this one.
That's perfect. Thank you for your feedback. So excellent. So I completely agree. You guys have come up with excellent ways in which we can help our faculty. And maybe when we're done with our sessions, we can actually take this back to our institutions. And the next time one of your colleagues tells you why an online session is not as effective, you can actually give them some reasons and strategies for overcoming some of their issues. And actually, you know, we talked about how one of the reasons faculty believe that this is not such a great idea is because they think there's not as much time for interaction. But as you can see in the session we are carrying out, I mean, you guys are interacting with me and with each other through text chat and by hitting the talk button. So depending on the system that you use, you can actually have plenty of interaction. It just sort of depends on the ratio, right, of faculty to students. So when it comes to a large classroom environment, the amount of interaction that you actually have with your professor may actually be limited because of the fact that you have 100 students in one lecturer. In an online setting, you may be able to impart more information and use the class time for active learning types of sessions. So with that, we'll move on to our next topic, which is blended learning. And blended learning or hybrid learning is exactly what it sounds like. It involves combining both face-to-face and online instruction so our students come away with a deeper understanding of the process. So on the left-hand side of the screen here, this is on-site teaching in which essentially all the interaction is face-to-face versus traditional distance education, which we think of where everything is done online. There's really no face-to-face interaction between the students and faculty or student to student. And then blended learning is kind of here in between. And, you know, if you just look at the statistics in the webinar by Inside Higher Education, which was carried out by Jafchik and Lederman, they mentioned that in 2002, there were 1.6 million U.S. college students that were taking at least one online course. But by 2012, that number was up to 6.7 million. So you can see that this is a very popular strategy, and you know, because there's so much resistance on the part of some faculty to adopting a completely online learning system, blended learning seems to be a viable alternative because you can still have some on-site activities. It's just that the on-site activities that we typically do in blended learning involve more active interaction. So these are things like, you know, working in a small group to come up with a reason for solving a problem. So for example, I'm a dermatopathologist and I teach our medical students and residents in skin pathology. So a lot of the blended learning in-class activities we do involve I'll project an image of a melanoma, for example, and the students will work in groups to come up with a differential diagnosis for what they think it is. Then they'll talk about it and we'll come up with a solution together. So that's a more interactive thing that we do in class. And what they actually do online is listen to a recorded presentation. They take self-assessment quizzes. So they do things which they can do in their own time online, and then we work together on things that are harder for them. So some people also call this the flipped classroom because you're doing homework in class, and at home you actually listen to the lecture. Does this make sense? If this makes sense, please go in and give me a smiley face. So what about you, Shamala? Did this little part make sense to you? Excellent. So now we're going to move on to our next self-assessment question. So here I have 4 activities listed, some of which are better in a face-to-face setting and some which are better online. So this, I think, is key when you're designing a hybrid course, is deciding what is better done online versus face-to-face. So let's start here with Deepa. Why don't you go in and move things? I see you've already moved the small group discussion as something that's better face-to-face, and I totally agree. Lecture, absolutely. I agree that a lecture presenting new content is probably better online because the students now have time to kind of think about it. Solving a case study, so Shamala is putting that into better face-to-face. And then the self-assessment quiz, I agree, is absolutely a better online activity. So excellent. Any questions about this? If you guys have any questions, please raise your hand at this point. Okay, perfect. So we're going to move on. So let's talk a little bit about how we can actually use this blended learning strategy in our classes. So one of the reasons you want to do this is because studies have shown that there was actually a study done in 2009 by the U.S. Department of Education, and they found that students in online classes actually perform better than those in face-to-face classes. And students who were in a hybrid environment or a blended environment did better than people who were only in an online class or only in a face-to-face class. And I think this is fascinating because really the data actually shows you that when you have sort of this combination of students doing things on their own at home and then coming into class and actually being able to interact with their instructor, that they learn better. And one of the reasons for this is because deep learning and understanding doesn't just happen with somebody talking to you, right? In order for you to learn and truly understand the material, you have to work with it. You have to practice it repeatedly. And this is something else that we're doing during our talk today. After each little bit of lecturing that I do, I make sure that you can actually put that into practice by giving you a little self-assessment activity. So when you go home and design your own class, I hope that you will continue to give your students opportunities to practice and interact with you in class. So let's do our next assessment activity here. How does blended learning improve student understanding compared to traditional lectures? So I'm going to go in and change your polling options. So this is a multiple choice question, and you should now be able to click between A, B, C, D, or E. So please click in your response now. Okay, and we will see if we can display your results. And make sure that you can see the question here. So excellent. So we have one student who picked B. Deepa picked increasing cognitive overload, and Shamala said it was by increasing opportunities for active learning. So excellent job, you guys. Let's talk about cognitive overload. So cognitive overload is essentially when students get overloaded with information because there's too much coming at them at one time. So one of the purposes that we do blended learning is actually to decrease cognitive overload by giving them small chunks of information that they can then listen to in their own time. So when they come to class, they have more time to actually think about and solve issues. So I think D is actually the correct answer, that when you're in a blended learning environment, students actually have more opportunities for active learning and practicing what they have learned. So Deepa, did you have any questions about that? Give me a smiley face if this makes sense to you. Okay, perfect, excellent. So we'll move on now to the next phase here, and this is where we'll talk about how you can actually use some of this in your own classes. So how can you use blended learning and educational technology to make your classes better? So for this question, I want you to use your whiteboard tools. So on the fourth icon on your left, the big capital A, if you click on that, that will help you to come up with a text box. And I want you to create a text box for yourself like I'm doing here for Deepa. All right, and then go in and type your answers. I want you both to do that, and I'll give you a minute for that, and then we'll come together and talk about it. So I'm going to start the timer. And I'll give you 1 minute to write down your answers. So Shamla, are you doing okay? I can see that things are delayed a little bit for you. Would you like me to create a text box for you? Okay, that's okay. I hope you've both had a chance to kind of think about these questions, and we're going to go ahead and talk about it. So Shamla, you can keep typing, and or you can just think about the question, and we'll come up with Deepa and hear from her. So Deepa, can you press the talk button and tell me how you can apply some of this in your classes?
Well, I think what you can do is, if you have a lot of complicated information, you can break it up into little chunks and make smaller lectures out of it. So then that allows the students to listen to one lecture at a time, have time to think about it, do some applications, assessment tests, and then come back to the next part of the lecture.
Excellent. And I hope that's something that you plan on taking away and using in your classes. So thank you for sharing that. Shamla, can you come on the speakerphone? Can you press the talk button and tell us how you plan on using this in your classes?
Use computers.
Yes, we can absolutely use computers and online technology. How specifically will you use computers in your classes?
I don't know.
Okay, well, thank you. I know education is not your primary field, so that's fine. You can press the talk button again, so you're off the microphone. Perfect. And yeah, so absolutely. Some of the ways, I'll share with you guys some ways in which I do this. So for blended learning, I mentioned that I'm a pathologist, so with my teaching, most of my lectures get recorded and presented online, so the students and residents have time to work on it on their own. And I think that really works better for them because they can do it in their own time. They can pause it. They can listen to it at triple speed if they wanted to. And then when they come to class, we actually apply that material, as Deepa was talking about, with little activities. We try to work in little groups and solve problems to make sure that they really get the point. So I think I'm glad that both of you were able to come up with some ways in which you can use this in your own classes. So in conclusion, we have learned that educational technology and online resources can really help keep students engaged and promote a deeper understanding. Blended learning is actually more effective than face-to-face in improving deeper student understanding. And using technology can actually help your students remember things long-term more than just a face-to-face lecture. So if this makes sense to you, please go in and give me a smiley face. So Shamala, do you have any questions about this? If not, please give me a smiley face. Perfect. And once again, these are the learning objectives. So I believe we have come up with some strategies for you to overcome faculty resistance, to learn why blended learning promotes a deeper understanding, as well as some ways in which you can use blended learning in your classes. So if this makes sense to you, please give me, I will go in and change the polling type here again. All right, so if this makes sense, please give me a green check mark. So I'll wait for, okay, perfect, excellent. So thank you for the time that you have spent in this webinar. These are the references that I have used for this presentation. And if you have any additional questions or comments, please raise your hand. Okay, feel free to email me if you'd like to set up a time for further discussion or clarification. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you guys next week at the same time.